Hello, you're welcome to my channel. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for always tuning in. And if this is your first time here, you are most welcome. My name is Eva Christopher, and in this channel, I teach easy pattern drafting and sewing tutorial. Please click on the subscribe button and click on the notification button to stay updated for when I post. You can also recommend this channel to anyone who has interest in sewing. Thank you. In today's tutorial, we'll be learning how to draft and sew a butt and hips padded skirt. Like you can see in the video, the tutorial is beginner friendly and easy to follow. Just pay attention and follow the steps. These are all the materials you need for this project. Of course, you'll be needing a foam. This foam could be a 1-inch foam or a 1/2-inch foam. But for this project, I used a 1-inch foam. You can get a 1/2-inch foam if you do not want it too curvy. But for this project, I use a 1-inch foam. And then I use a cloth wadding. You can also use a cotton wadding if you want. And then my fabric and of course my lining. So let's just keep this aside and jump right into the pattern drafting. For the drafting, we are going to draft a basic skirt pattern. If you do not know how to draft a basic skirt pattern, I have a video of that on my channel. Please do well to watch so that it will be so easy for you. So the first line is my waistline, and from there I came down by 8 inches. That is my hip line. And then I will go down by 17 inches. That is my knee line. Now I will go ahead and extend these lines. I'm labeling my waistline, my hip line, and then my knee line. So my waistline, I'm going to take my waist measurement divided by 4. I'm going to insert it, then I'm going to insert 1 inch for that. And on my hip line, I'm going to take my hips divided by 4. And I'm going to insert it. Then for my knee line, whatever I have on my hip line, I'm going to minus 1 inch from it. And that will be my knee, the measurement on my knee line. And I'll connect these lines. So after that, I'm going to add my sewing allowance. I'm going to add 1.5 inch for my sewing allowance. And I'm going to connect these lines. So this is basically the drafting for a basic skirt pattern. So I'm going to cut this out. And I'm going to use this front panel to cut my back panel. My front and my back panels are almost the same. The difference is just the zip allowance at the back. So I brought out 1.5 inch for my zip allowance, and I placed my front skirt panel on that line, and I'm going to cut out my back panel. So after cutting your front and your back panel, the next thing is to insert our dart. So from the middle of my front panel, I came in by 4 inches. That is my bust span divided by 2. So from there, I came down by 4.5 inches. That is the length of my dart. And on both sides of that line, I took 0.5 inches and then connected it to the 4.5 inches I came down to. And for the back panel, starting from the line, that zipper line, I'm going to go in by 4 inches as well. And I came down by 5.5 inches for the back, for the length of the dart for the back. And from that line, I'm going to take 0.5 inch on both sides and then connect my darts. Now this is my front and my back panel. I'm going to label them. That's my front panel and my back panel. Now I'm going to use these pieces to cut out on my fabric. So to cut on our fabric, we are going to make little changes at the hip. Remember, I'm working with a 1-inch foam, so that foam allowance is what I'm going to add at the hip. This is my front panel. This is the front panel I want to cut, and I'm going to cut it on fold. As you can see that my fabric is on fold. So I'm going to give that 1-inch allowance for the foam at the hip. So at the hip line, I'm going to add 1 inch for my foam allowance. Then I'm going to connect that 1 inch to my waist and also to my knee line. I'm actually making a long skirt, so I'm going to extend to the length of the skirt I want to make. After I'm done connecting these lines, I'm going to extend this line to my desired skirt length, and then I'm going to cut out the front panel of my skirt. This is the front panel of my skirt, so I'm just going to use it to cut out the back panel. The only difference is the zip allowance, so I'm just taking 1.5 inch zipper allowance, and I'm going to place my front panel and then cut it out. For my front panel, I have just 1 piece cut on fold, and for my back panel, I have 2 pieces. So we'll use this to cut out on our fabric exactly the same, and then we'll go over to the drafting of the padding. For the drafting of the padding, we do not need any allowance at all, both the sewing allowance and the dart allowance. So I'm just trying to impute the sewing allowance at the back so that I can cut it out. Remember the 1.5 inch I gave for sewing allowance. We do not need it to draft this butt and hip padding, so we are going to remove it. So I'm going to remove this 1.5 inch for the sewing allowance that I added, both for the front and the back panel. And then remember the 1 inch dart allowance that I gave. We also do not need it. We do not need any sort of allowance at all. So I'm going to remove this 1 inch that I added for the dart. From there, I'm going to connect it to the hip line. And then I'm going to cut this out. These are the patterns we need to draft the padding with no sewing allowance whatsoever. Now we are going to start with our front pattern. From the waist of our front pattern, we are going to come down by 1 inch. To draft this, we are going to come down 1 inch from our waist pattern. So at a time in this video, you will see that I came down by 3 inches. Please totally ignore that, because I was trying to explain that if you're going to join this skirt to a bodice, before you attach your padding, you have to come down 3 inches. So for the drafting of this padding, please ignore the 3 inches you will see me impute in this pattern. I was just explaining that if you're attaching it to a bodice, you will come down 3 inches. So it has nothing to do with the drafting, okay? So for the drafting of the padding, we are just going to come down 1 inch, as you can see me doing. So I came down by 1 inch. Now at the hip line, I'm going to take 4.5 inches because I do not want it to come at the center of my leg. So if you're a bigger person, you can take 5 inches or even 5.5 inches. So now you need your under butt measurement. Make sure you measure yourself or your customer. My under butt is 13. So from my waist, I came down 13 inches. And from that 13 inches, I also went down by 3 inches. Please watch what I'm doing. I came down 1 inches. From my hip line, I took 4.5 inches. And then from my waist to 13 inches is my under butt. And then from my under butt, I went down 3 inches. Now I'm going to connect these lines together. So this is it for the front pattern. I'm just labeling the up. With an arrow, I'm signifying where I'm going to connect to the other part of the pattern and then the down part. Now I'm going to set this aside and we'll go over to the back pattern. For the back pattern, just like we did for the front, I'm going to come down 1 inch. Just like we did for the front. So now I'm labeling my hip line, my waistline, and my knee line. On my waistline, on my hip line, I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch. This is to give room for our zip to sit properly because you do not want your zip to climb on top of your foam. So we are giving a little space for our zip to sit on our hip. Then from my waist, I'm going to come down 13 inches. That is my under butt measurement. That's my under butt line, From my waist to 13 inches is my under butt. And then from that under butt, I still went down by 3 inches, just like we did for the front. Now from my under butt, that is the 13 inches, which is my under butt, I'm going to take 4.5. I'm going to take 4.5 from that under butt, from my under butt, not the 3 inches that I came down to. So now I'm going to try to connect this line from the 1 inch to the 1/2 inch I came in from the hip line, then from to the 4.5 inches that I came in from the under butt, then to the 3 inches I came down to after the under butt. I hope you understand what I'm saying. If you do not understand, please watch what I'm doing in the video so that you understand. I came down 1 inches from my waist. From my hip line, I went in 1/2 inch to give room for my zip, and then 13 inches is my under butt, and then my under butt I came in by 4.5 inches. If you're a bigger person, you can take 5 or 5.5. So I connected it to my under butt, then I will take it down to that 3 inches that I came down to after my 13 inches under butt. I hope you can see what I'm doing. So it's just like we are trying to create like a butt shape. So this is basically it for the back panel. Now go ahead and cut out my back piece. Like we did for the front, do not forget to label your pattern the up, the arrow which signifies where we are going to join, and then the down part. I'll also cut out my front pattern. So this is basically all we have. We are just going to go ahead to cut out on our foam. So I'll just place this on the foam. Please use your pin to hold this together. I later use my pin to hold it in place. Then I'm going to go ahead to cut out my foam. When you're done cutting, you have to flip it to the other side so that you have two different back pieces. We'll also do the same for the front panel. Now we're going to flip it to get the other side of the front panel. When we are done with this, we are going to label our up, signify with the arrow where we are going to join, then down. As we did for the front, we'll also do the same for the back panels. Now after you're done labeling, place the foams the way you're going to join them and then trim the sides. Do not trim the where you're going to join. That place the arrows are facing, ignore that place. You're not going to trim them, but you're going to trim the other side of the foams. Make sure you place them together so that you know where you're trimming. So now this is the trick. The trick of this whole thing is how you trim your foam. Just take all the time you need and patiently trim this foam. You're going to trim it, especially that edges, so that it's not going to look bulky or bumpy or rough. You're just going to calm down and really give it a good trim. Just watch what I'm doing in the video. You give a good trim it down, like make it level from that upper side to the down part, so that when you wear it, it's not going to look too bulky or too noticeable that you're wearing something. take all the time you need to get this right, because this is basically all the work. So when you're done, this is how my foam look. It looks so smooth as I'm touching it, no bumps or rough edges. Once I was done with my trimming, the next thing to do is to cover my foam with my cloth interface. You can also use a cotton interface to cover your foams, but do not use any paper interface or any hard interface. We are covering this foam because we cannot sew directly on the foam, because as time goes on, the thread will actually lose because this foam is not durable to sustain stitches. I hope you understand. So we are going to go to the ironing table and we are going to iron this to our foam. I've ironed my interface to my foam. I also labeled them. Now I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew round on the interface, just to hold the interface in place with my foam. I've run the stitches together, as you can see. I've also placed them the way I'm going to join them. Now, you can decide to run a stitch on your machine, but I prefer to use my hand, needle and thread to join these together. It's more easier for me that way than running it on my machine. But if you want to run yours on your machine, all you have to do is just to put your foams together and run your stitches. But I prefer to use my hand needle. So I'm going to use my hand needle and my thread, and I'm going to join the front and the back together like I'm doing in the video. And I'm going to stitch them together. Once I was done, this is how it looked. Now we'll go ahead to shape our skirt. I'm going to take my waist measurement divided by 2, and then whatever allowance I have, which is 1.5 on both sides, I'm going to place that. And also at the hip, I'm going to take the 1.5 inch I added for sewing allowance. After taking this 1.5 inch, I still have the 1 inch that I added for my padding. So I'm trying to shape my skirt. I'll also do the same for the other side of the skirt. And then I will go to the machine and I will join the side of the skirt together, and also shape the same for my lining and join together. Now I've joined my lining together just like I did for my main fabric. Now it's time to attach our padding, and we are going to attach our padding on the lining. Now watch what I'm doing. That smaller part goes to the front and the bigger part goes to the back. That is the butt pad. So now, like I stated, if you're adding this to a bodice, or if this is a high waist skirt, you have to come down 3 inches like I'm doing. Do not attach them 1 inch down from your waist. You have to come down 3 inches. This skirt was attached to a bodice. This is why I came down by 3 inches. But if you're just doing like a normal skirt, 1 inch is enough to come down. So you can see where I placed this at the middle of my hem, my side hem. Now I'm going to use my pin to hold this down so that it doesn't move from that 3 inches I came down from. I'm trying so hard to match the seams together. So after I was done with this, I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew it. Make sure your lining is not rumpled or folded in any way. You see the way I placed it, I'm going to run a stitch like that to attach it to my lining. When I was done, I'm going to flip it over to the other side and I'm going to run a stitch down. I'll also do the same for the other side. Now after stitching this is what we have. I'm just going to attach them to my skirt. Now turn the right side of my skirt. I open the zip area so that it will be easy for me to attach with no stress. So I'm going to join my lining to my skirt. And I'm going to sew together. I also do the same for the other part. So this is how it looks on my skirt. As you can see the foam popping out. So now I'm going to flip the other side so that you see how it looks on the inside. So this is what it looks from the inside. So if you're making a skirt, all you have to do now is to attach your zip and then you're going to attach your waistband, and that is all. Remember I said I came down 3 inches before I attached my padding because this skirt will be attached to a bodice, that is an upper. If you are just making a normal skirt that is not a high-waisted skirt, all you have to do is come down just 1 inch from your waist before you attach your padding. So this is it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you understand. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed to this moment, please do wait to subscribe and please turn on your notification to get notified when I post new videos. Thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.